Greetings, I'm John from Two Brothers RC, and this is the Timber SWS. I got my start flying hobby-grade radio control with the original blue turbo timber, and I thought I'd amaze the world with my ace combat skills, but all I did was spend $300 to get 8 seconds of flight. I'd like to think that I've learned a little bit since then, but enough of my crappy flying history. Let's fast forward to now. The Timber SWS, short for Sport Wood Series, is everything that I wanted out of a timber. Or pretty much, anyway. It's fast. It rolls fast. This is just, it looks incredible in the sky. Look at the roll rate. See how fast it rolls with rudder mixed in. It flies on floats. It does amazing aerobatics. Wow. It flies slowly. It's the first timber that I've owned that's actually made out of wood, so the name now makes a lot more sense. I'm going to break up my usual voiceover format and use my own raw, unfiltered thoughts while I flew this big timber around. I'm also going to break up my usual 8 to 9 minute format by making this video as long as it needs to be to really showcase how amazing this new timber really is. My wife and I filmed it over the course of 3 different days and put over 16 batteries through it. Like you'd expect from me and nothing less, here's the good and the bad. Let's start off with what I loved. I love that it's a timber, and I know that some of you guys clown on Horizon Hobby for this one, but I doubt they'd keep making timbers if they didn't sell, so there's a ravenous audience out there for timbers, and I consider myself to be one of them. I stand by my comments in the Twin Timber Maiden video.
For those of you guys who are like, oh my god, no, not another timber. Well, guess what? Deal with it. Timbers are awesome. I freaking love them. If I could get a timber with 4 engines, 8 engines, I don't care. I want every timber known to man. I want a timber with a jet engine on it.
Aerobatics are where timbers have always shined for me, and the Timber SWS is not a slouch here. In fact, it does aerobatics better than the foam timbers that I've flown, and it just feels completely planted in the sky to boot.
Oh, I bet you got that perfect too. Man, I love the pop tops in this thing.
There's a lot of space to work with for your preferred center of gravity, and the battery can be placed in several different spots to produce a wildly different feel in the air. I flew most of the wheeled segments with the CG balanced in between the 2 main cabin windows. On floats, I had it balanced in the middle of the rear cabin window, kind of like I do with the foam timbers that I fly. I feel that it flies better for me balanced further back, but you might prefer to have it balanced further forward. Give it a try and find out what works for you. I absolutely adore hovering timbers, and trying to hover and torque roll this beast on a nose-heavier center of gravity was difficult. With the CG further forward, it tends to nose backwards as the top of the plane faces you. This is not something that I've noticed with most airframes, as you usually need to have back elevator pressure to keep it stable, so I had to dance with the elevator a bit and press it forward and back to keep it stable, but once it started to spin, it would just stay there until I decided to throttle out of it. In stock form, it can't punch out of a hover, but it doesn't have any issues with nosing forward and flying out of them. With the center of gravity balanced in the middle of the rear cabin window, it acts more like the smaller foam timbers, and it's much easier to torque roll like that, making some graceful ballerina moves with light winds. This is some of what I most enjoy doing with a timber, and the Timber SWS does not disappoint whatsoever. It was never marketed as a 3D plane, but it is very capable of flying quite a few different 3D maneuvers. My first maiden flight with the Timber SWS made me so giddy with excitement that I just couldn't shut up while filming it, which kind of made voicing over maybe a little difficult.
Holy crap, dude! Would it be a maiden if I didn't do a flat spin? Oh my god. And they said it wasn't going to be as 3D capable as they said it. Yeah, come on, Horizon. This is pretty good, man. Oh my gosh, look at the knife edge on this thing. I'm not even full rudder on it. Oh my god, this is good. I'm going to have a hard time voicing over this because I can't shut up.
If you're new to balsa models, ground handling is like any other tail dragger, except that the Timber is huge and it has a big turn radius. Not really a big deal if you're on grass, but it is something to consider if your runway is as narrow as mine is. The Timber surprisingly doesn't need much, if any, rudder to counter P-factor, which is the tendency of the plane to turn left sharply as you throttle up. If you throttle up slowly and feed in minor amounts of right rudder as the tail begins to rise, you probably won't notice much, if any, deviation at all. Otherwise, it tracks pretty straight. Or you can just take off in 3-point config in a full send. It's really docile overall and not hard to handle, very much like the old foam Timber you're probably already used to flying. Yep, the Avian 100 amp ESC can utilize thrust reverse. While it's a neat tool to come to a stop on land, the wooden prop makes it dangerous to use, as you might prop strike and destroy it, and damage the motor box too. But on water, it's a great tool for backing up and getting in position. Water takeoffs and landings are super enjoyable. While the Timber does sit in the water kind of flat like a bus, it gets on step and throws water everywhere in an impressive spray. It looks awesome. If you're flying on a windy day, just remember to use some aileron into the wind if you're in a crosswind. Otherwise, just fly into the wind if you can. One thing to note is that the stock float servo, as of filming this video, is not waterproof. So until that's fixed, and I'm sure it will be, you can use Corrosion X in the servo, which will completely waterproof it and make it last a long time. We used Corrosion X in a spray bottle, and the link is in the description if you'd like to have some for yourself. Landing isn't too difficult either. If this is your first float plane, maybe consider practicing with the smaller Turbo Timber first. Both planes land very similarly, and you can get a lot of useful practice flying the 1.5 meter model before moving up to the 2 meter Turbo Timber SWS. Successfully flying on water requires watching the plane's angle of attack and keeping throttle applied so that you land smoothly, rather than dropping it in. A common complaint with landing gear on model airplanes is that they don't handle impacts well. Well, I'm here to tell you that neither do full-scale aircraft, because these are airplanes, they're not monster trucks. While model aircraft are usually more robust than full-scale aircraft, the principles are the same. Hard impacts will cause damage. I suggest doing touch-and-go practice on land, and on water too. A shallow, stabilized approach is always best, unless you're going for a bush-style landing and dropping in from up high. But even then, you need technique to stall the plane in for a landing so you don't smash it into the ground. It wouldn't be much of a review if I didn't cover the stall characteristics, so let's go ahead and discuss that too.
Oh, we need to see how it stalls too.
Yes.
3, 2, 1, power off, stall coming in. Power off, let's see how it handles. Drops a wing. Not entirely unexpected, generally how Timbers tend to fly. Just something to be aware of. Although honestly, if you stall this plane, I think you're flying it wrong. It's so forgiving. Stall it again. Hold the stick this time. Okay. Makes for a pretty cool spin that you could use for aerobatics.
One thing to note is that the nature of float flying means that you should probably have some kind of recovery vehicle. Some people use a boat, but I personally use another float plane with thrust reverse and push stranded airplanes back to shore.
Gotta let it dry out.
If you get into a stall with a float plane and don't recover from it like I did here, it may end up stranded. So have a plan for that.
Stalled at the last second, I flipped the throttle to keep it from crashing.
Like I said, you probably won't be stalling it. It's really forgiving, and if you somehow manage it, just let off the elevator pressure, and you'll be fine. The timber also excels at other aerobatics, including flat turns. It's a little different than I'm used to because of the size of the airframe, but it's absolutely doable and takes up a ton of space. So make sure that you've got a big flying site to work with before trying this maneuver out. Tumbles and crankshafts are also something that you can try.
It does crankshafts. Not many of them, but at least one. Oh, did you get that?
I get everything.
That was awesome.
If you choose to fly with floats, do be aware that the floats and hardware are bought separately, but they also confer an additional benefit. The floats shift the center of pressure or something. I'm not an aerodynamicist at all, but the effect is that you get a much more pitch-sensitive timber with the floats on. Look at these front flips it can do with the CG balanced in the middle of the rear cabin window. This is just like my foam turbo timber. Awesome. I gotta see if I can pull off a front flip landing a foot or two off the water at some point. Floats also let you perform a knife edge spin. On wheels, the best I could get was one spin. With floats, I was able to get 3 or 4 before it got too close to the water for my comfort. The review score is a nearly unprecedented 10 out of 10. It has enough power to do almost anything you want. It's gorgeous and really well built, and to top it off, it's as docile or as crazy as you want it to be. And even better, it comes with an 8-channel receiver too. This is a plane that I'm gonna love flying for many years to come, and I think you will too. And if you like what you see, consider picking one up via the links in the description to help support us in what we do here at Two Brothers RC. Now let's move into the setup section after these final words, and then I'll show you how to get the most out of your timber SWS.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Like, this is a real honor for me to be able to fly a timber because I got my start flying timbers, although pretty poorly, as you probably saw earlier when I attached a GoPro to it, and I had no idea about center of gravity at that time, and well, I paid dearly for it, but this is kind of a mark in my aviation career to be able to test fly and show this off for Horizon. I'm really happy with this. This is phenomenal. I can't wait till I can just play with this some more. It's just so good. I mean, you see me flying this thing, I think you guys can tell when I like something the way I fly, especially if she's having a hard time keeping up with it. Yeah, thumbs up, huh? Awesome stuff. Thanks for watching, guys. Ooh.
The Timber SWS is a huge airplane. Just like my Carbon Z-Cub SS, I have to take it in the front seat with it folded all the way back if the floats are attached. On wheels, it takes up the entire length of my Chevrolet Impala's trunk. I could make it fit a little easier by taking the wheels off, but thankfully it does fit, just barely, with them installed and the canopy removed. And if you're a nerd like me and you enjoy feeling the lift of a wing while you're holding it, you'll be pleasantly surprised. The Timber's wings are really effective even at the speeds that my arm is moving them here. I also love that the wing connection is pretty easy to do, and that I can put the aluminum wing tube into the plane. I also love that this is a well-built model with a lot of reinforcement. It'll take being thrown around, and the big wings catch air like a giant surfboard in the sky. Physically connecting the wing cables is much easier if you zip tie the servo leads from the receiver to the wood structure inside, which makes it a one-handed job to set up. I also love that it comes with an Avian ESC and that I don't have to deal with voltage cables to get telemetry. It's all plug and play and it's easy to set up. Join us on Discord if you ever need tips on how to work with voltage telemetry. I also love the servo quality and that they're high voltage compatible. They're a little noisy, but it isn't uncommon for digital servos to be that way. If you're the tinkering type, you can get maximum performance out of the stock servos by adjusting the ESC to output 8.4 volts. I also love that it comes stock with lights too. I wish every airplane did. Being able to fly when it gets darker and fly confidently is something that I wish more manufacturers would embrace. It's gotta be possible to add LEDs with a minimal weight penalty. Now I don't care as much for the stiff gear, but I haven't flown a single balsa plane yet that doesn't have stiff gear, so the Timber isn't alone here at all. Every manufacturer I've flown models from has had very similar gear setups. Whether they be metal or carbon fiber, they're pretty much all stiff when you're flying a wood airframe. Alright, let's move into the setup guide. You can see my control surface travels here. I prefer maximum throws when I fly, and I also prefer a neutral to tail heavy center of gravity, but how I fly isn't for everyone. A lot of this info should be super useful for you if you're curious about how my Timber was set up though. Here's the basic wiring diagram for your receiver as it came stock. Throttle, aileron, elevator, rudder, lights, and flaps. If you want to stick to the basic 6-channel setup, you can skip most of this guide and look at the flap system guide next. Here's my setup for the flap system. Horizon has their own recommendations that I'll suggest you go with first. They work well for wheels, but these values work well for floats. As always, try flaps up high and see how the Timber performs before committing to flying it low. If you want to try crow and full span flaps, you'll need to follow this wiring diagram and make sure that your transmitter's aircraft type is set to 2 ailerons and 1 flap. These values are the default spectrum channel assignments for that wing type. The first mix is for full span flaps and crow. This is a mix of the flap system, not the flap servos, to the left aileron. On Spectrum radios, this causes both ailerons to move in the same direction and is referred to as back mixing in your transmitter manual. The percentages I used are listed here. You'll need another mix for elevator compensation. Those values are listed on screen as well. Compensation for full span flaps and crow is absolutely needed, as the Timber will nosedive without an elevator mix in full span flaps, and will balloon severely without a down elevator mix compensating. Crow is a super useful feature for slowing the Timber down, and it allows you to fly incredibly slowly in wind. It's also good for flying in confined areas or to shoot approaches that might be more difficult if you were to try forward slipping. While full span flaps are mostly only useful for getting up very quickly, and honestly, on this plane they're not all that great because the flaps are pretty darn useful by themselves. That was freaking cool. Perfect timing on that wind, huh?
Yeah.
How effective that was?
About time we make the wind work for us.
Yeah, really. The next 2 mixes are for snap flaps, and they're both identical except that one mix is slightly less than the other. Snap flaps are an elevator to flap servo mix that causes an elevator pull to drop full flaps instantly, which causes a massive pitch moment that backflips a Timber and what I can only describe as being very much like an F-22 Raptor doing a thrust vectored backflip. Check this out. Backflip. Let's get another one of those
ditchovers.
And this last mix is a curved mix. This mix tells the aileron system, not the servos, to control the right aileron, which in a spectrum radio causes the ailerons to move differentially. In other words, one will move up and the other will move down. In a crow or full span flap configuration, you need this mix to get full travel. Otherwise, the servos are limited because they're already at a 0 point that the transmitter's mix has set for them. Copy this mix value and try it out. You'll get all the benefits of special wing mixing without losing any roll. If you're new to curved mixes and you want some help setting this up, join us on Discord and feel free to ask in the Tech and Setup channel. That about covers it. Be sure to let us know what you think on our Discord server, and we'll see you again next time. Cheers!